Lucian Ravencrest had stopped feeling decades ago. The realization came to him in fragments like ice forming on still water, slow, inevitable numbing. One day he noticed he could no longer taste wine beyond the copper tang of blood it carried. Then music became mere noise, beautiful once, but now just vibrations in air. Then came the worst loss, the ability to feel joy at sunrise or sorrow at death or hope for anything beyond the next century of endless grinding duty. 347 years of existence had taught him that immortality was not a gift. It was a slow drowning in an ocean with no shore. Perched on cliffs that dropped 300 feet into churning northern seas, Ravencrest Keep existed in perpetual twilight. Mist rolled through valleys of ancient pine curling around towers of black stone that had witnessed the rise and fall of human empires. Inside the throne room, Lucian stood motionless before windows that faced eternal darkness, watching the moon set over his kingdom. Today would bring his seventh bride. The thought stirred nothing in him, not anticipation, not dread, just the quiet acceptance of another chess piece moving into position on a board he no longer cared about winning. His steward had assured him this one would be different, simple, proper, grateful for the position. A young woman of modest means who understood duty and would ask no questions. Perfect, safe, forgettable. Behind him, the throne room stretched vast and cold. 12 seats for the 12 vampire houses he ruled, all vacant now. Tapestries depicting 3 centuries of conquest hung like funeral shrouds. The crown of the northern territories rested on black velvet silver, wrought into thorns and crescent moons, a beautiful prison he had worn since he was barely more than a boy. Your Majesty, his mother's voice echoed through the chamber. Dowager Isadora Ravencrest moved like smoke through shadows 6 centuries old, and still radiating the predatory grace that had made her legendary. Her gown was midnight silk, her silver hair coiled like a serpent's crown, her eyes the color of winter stars. The carriage has been sighted, she said, her tone flat with disapproval. Your bride arrives within the hour. Lucian turned from the window. His reflection in the darkened glass showed a man frozen at 34, dark hair swept back from aristocratic features, gray eyes that had witnessed too much a face that could have been carved from the same stone as his castle. Handsome, they said. Intimidating, they whispered. Empty, he knew. You don't approve. It wasn't a question. I don't understand. Isadora circled him slowly, a hawk examining prey. 6 times, Lucian. 6 wives who died or left or went mad. And now you choose another mortal. Another fragile human girl who will wither and die before you've learned to pronounce her great-grandchildren's names. That's precisely why I chose her. His mother's expression shifted, confusion, then understanding, then something that might have been pity. You want simple because you can't bear complicated anymore. You want proper because wild broke your heart. You want someone who will ask nothing of you because you have nothing left to give. Lucian said nothing. What could he say? She was right. The council won't accept this, Isadora continued. A 7th mortal bride, they'll see weakness. Then let them see weakness. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. I am still king. My choice stands. Isadora studied him for a long moment, and for the first time in decades, he saw genuine concern in her ancient eyes. What happened to you, my son? You used to burn with purpose. Now you're just fading. I'm 347 years old, Mother. I've earned the right to fade. She moved closer, one pale hand touching his cheek, a gesture from his childhood, when he still knew how to feel her affection. There's a condition we don't speak of. When a vampire loses the will to live, loses the capacity to feel anything real, they become hollow. Empty vessels going through motions. You're closer to that edge than you think. I know. He stepped back from her touch. Which is why I chose a simple, proper bride who will make no demands on a heart that has nothing left to offer. The sound of carriage wheels on stone echoed up from the courtyard below. She had arrived. Marguerite Fairborn had never been simple, proper, or particularly good at following instructions. At 26, she possessed the kind of beauty that society tried to tame, but never quite managed: auburn curls that refused to stay pinned, green eyes that sparked with intelligence and mischief in equal measure, a frame too sturdy for fashionable fragility, and a spirit far too large for drawing rooms and tea parties. Her guardian, Lord Pemberton, had spent 10 years attempting to mold her into an acceptable lady. He had failed spectacularly. Remember, Pemberton hissed from across the carriage as they rattled through the final miles toward Ravencrest Keep. You are to be grateful, obedient, and above all silent unless directly addressed. This is your last chance, Marguerite. His Majesty has been extraordinarily generous in accepting you despite your reputation. She preferred Wren after the small, fierce bird, not the elaborate name she'd been born with, stared out at the landscape rushing past. Pine forests so thick they swallowed light, cliffs that dropped into nothingness, and a head rising from mist like something conjured from Nightmare the Castle. What kind of king lives in a place like that, she murmured. The kind who doesn't tolerate impertinence, Pemberton snapped. The kind who could destroy our family with a word. But Wren couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. The summons had come 3 weeks ago, formal cold offering marriage to a king she'd never met, never even heard of until the letter arrived. The northern territories were so remote that they barely appeared on maps. And the instructions had been strange. Arrive after sunset, bring minimal staff, tell no one of your destination. The carriage jolted to a stop. Wren looked up at Ravencrest Keep and felt her breath catch. The castle was massive, Gothic, beautiful in a way that made her chest ache with something like recognition. Towers stretched toward a sky permanently caught between dusk and darkness. Gargoyles leered from parapets. Every window glowed with warm light, but somehow the building itself seemed to absorb rather than reflect illumination. A footman in black livery offered his hand, his face carefully blank. Wren noticed his skin was unusually pale, his movements too fluid, his eyes reflecting the torchlight like an animal's. She stepped down onto cobblestones worn smooth by centuries of use. The air tasted of salt and pine, and something else, something copper sweet that made her stomach turn. Miss Fairborn, the voice came from the massive oak doors now standing open. A woman emerged, tall and ethereal, silver hair gleaming against midnight silk. I am Dowager Isadora Ravencrest. Welcome to our home. The interior of Ravencrest Keep was even more overwhelming than the exterior. Vaulted ceilings disappeared into shadow. Tapestries depicted battles Wren didn't recognize, wars fought with weapons that looked ancient even in thread. Suits of armor lined the corridors, not decorative pieces, but genuine battle-worn steel. How old was this place? They climbed stairs that seemed to go on forever, passed through corridors where their footsteps echoed like whispers. And with each step, Wren's certainty grew. Something here was very, very wrong. The throne room doors opened. Wren's first thought was that she'd walked into a cathedral built for darkness itself. The space was enormous, lit by hundreds of candles that somehow made shadows deeper rather than dispelling them. 12 thrones circled the room, 11 empty, one occupied. And on that throne sat the most beautiful man Wren had ever seen. Lucian Ravencrest rose as she entered, and the movement was liquid grace that made her breath catch. He was tall, lean, dressed in black that made his pale skin seem luminous. Dark hair framed features that could have been sculpted by a master artist, but it was his eyes that stopped her heart. Gray, cold, utterly devastatingly empty. This man was dying inside. She knew it the way she knew storms before rain, the way she knew lies before words. Miss Fairborn, his voice was cultured, controlled, and completely devoid of warmth. Welcome to Ravencrest Keep. I trust your journey was comfortable. Wren found her voice, though it came out sharper than she'd intended. Comfortable enough, though I must say, Your Majesty, your roads could use significant improvement. I counted no fewer than 8 potholes that nearly threw me from my seat. Silence crashed through the throne room. Pemberton made a strangled sound behind her. Isadora's eyes widened fractionally, and Lucian stared at her as if she'd just sprouted wings. He paused, and for the first time something flickered in those dead eyes. I beg your pardon. Your roads, Wren repeated, warming to her subject despite the horrified looks from her guardian. They're in terrible condition. Surely a king of your stature could arrange for better infrastructure maintenance. The corner of Lucian's mouth twitched. Was that amusement? I shall look into the matter immediately. Though I confess, Miss Fairborn, most ladies meeting me for the first time choose different topics for our initial conversation. Do they? Wren met his gaze directly, refusing to be intimidated. What do they usually discuss? The weather, your impressive castle, how grateful they are for your generous offer, despite their inferior station. Now she definitely saw amusement, a ghost of it buried under centuries of practiced control. Something very much like that, yes. How boring for you, Marguerite. Pemberton's voice cracked like a whip. You will apologize this instant. No. Lucian's single word silenced the entire room. He descended from his throne, moving toward Wren with that same unsettling grace. Up close, she noticed details that her mind struggled to process. Skin too perfect. Eyes that reflected candlelight in ways human eyes shouldn't. An absolute stillness when he stopped moving, as if he didn't need to breathe. What was he, Miss Fairborn? He said quietly, studying her face with an intensity that made her skin prickle. I believe you and I should speak privately. Your guardian may retire to the guest quarters. We shall become acquainted. It wasn't a request. They walked through gardens that bloomed under moonlight. Wren followed Lucian through paths of night-flowering jasmine and pale roses past fountains that sang in darkness under trees that seemed older than memory. Everything here operated in reverse sleeping during day, alive at night. You're not what I expected, Lucian said, finally breaking the silence. Neither are you. Wren stopped beside a fountain carved with strange symbols. Who are you really? Not the title, not the crown. Who is Lucian Ravencrest? He turned to face her, and in the moonlight she saw something shift in his expression, surprised perhaps that she would ask. A complicated question. I prefer complicated to simple lies. That almost smile flickered again. Do you always speak so directly? Do you always answer questions with questions? Touché. He moved to sit on the fountain's edge, and the gesture was so unexpectedly human that Wren found herself relaxing slightly. Very well, Miss Fairborn. Direct honesty. I am a king who has ruled too long, a man who has seen too much, someone who expected a simple proper bride to fill a role in his life without requiring anything of his heart. And you have already demonstrated that you are none of those things. Wren sat beside him, leaving careful distance between them. Why marriage? Why now? Why me? Because I am tired. The admission seemed to cost him something. Because I need something, someone. I'm not entirely sure anymore. And as for why your guardian's letters described you as quiet, grateful, eager for the security a king could provide, he lied spectacularly. Lord Pemberton has always been optimistic about my capacity for obedience, Wren said dryly. Then more seriously, I should tell you the truth. I am none of those things. I'm opinionated, difficult, completely uninterested in being decorative or silent. If that's what you need, you should send me back now. Lucian studied her for a long moment. What if I said 1 week? 1 week. Stay for 1 week. Let me show you my kingdom, my home, my life. At the end of that week, we can both decide whether this arrangement serves us. If not, you return to Lord Pemberton with my apologies and a generous settlement. It was more than fair, but Wren's instincts still screamed warnings. Why does everything here happen at night? She asked suddenly. Lucian went very still. What do you mean, arrival after sunset? No daytime activities scheduled. Your entire staff moving about in darkness. The castle itself designed to block out sun. She turned to face him fully. What are you hiding, Your Majesty? For a long moment he said nothing. Then slowly, deliberately, he extended his hand, palm up, in invitation. Walk with me. There's something you should see. The bride's memorial garden was hidden behind the east wing, accessible only through a locked gate whose key Lucian carried on a chain around his neck. As the iron gate swung open, Wren stepped into a space that stole her breath. 6 monuments rose from carefully tended grounds, each unique, each beautiful, each heartbreaking. Marble angels, stone benches, crystal obelisks, flowering trees planted in remembrance, and names carved in languages that span centuries. Genevieve Ashworth, 1744 to 1784. Isabella Moreau, 1810 to 1835. Catherine Blackwood, 1860 to 1875. Ophelia Whitmore, 1895 to 1895. Margaret Sterling, 1950 to 1952. Anne Thornfield, 2010 to 2010. Wren moved from monument to monument, her mind racing through impossible mathematics. These are graves, memorials. Lucian's voice was carefully controlled. Only some are buried here. Others chose to be interred with their families. But I remember them all. You remember? Wren turned to stare at him. The dates, the span of years. That's not possible unless I'm far older than I appear. Lucian moved to the first monument, running his fingers over Genevieve's name with a tenderness that made Wren's chest ache. I was born in 1677, Miss Fairborn, crowned king at 20. I have watched 6 wives live and die while I remained frozen at 34. The world tilted. Wren gripped the nearest monument for support. That's impossible. People don't live 300 years. People don't stay young forever unless they're not people. Lucian turned to face her, and in the moonlight she finally saw what her instincts had been screaming about since she arrived. His canines slightly elongated, his eyes reflecting light like mirrors, his absolute stillness, the kind that came from not needing breath or heartbeat. You're a vampire, Wren whispered. Yes. You're the vampire king. Yes. And these women, she looked at the monuments with new understanding. You married them, loved them, watched them die. 6 times. The words fell like stones. Genevieve lived 40 years as my wife. Isabella gave me 25 years. Catherine only 15. Ophelia I had to mercy kill when transformation drove her mad. Margaret and Anne left when terror drove them away. He moved to stand before the monument's shoulders bowed under the weight of centuries. So you see, Miss Fairborn, I have quite the history with marriage, which is why I chose you, simple, proper, asking nothing of me. Someone who wouldn't demand my heart because I have none left to give. The raw pain in his voice hit Wren like a physical blow. This beautiful broken man wasn't looking for a bride. He was looking for someone who wouldn't hurt him anymore. Why tell me this? She asked quietly. Why not hide it? Let me discover the truth slowly. Because I'm tired of lies. He met her gaze, and for the first time she saw genuine emotion in those gray eyes. Exhaustion, grief, and something that might have been desperate hope. 6 times I hid what I was. 6 times it ended in tragedy. I thought perhaps honesty might change the pattern, or at least let you make an informed choice. Wren's mind raced through implications, consequences, impossibilities. She should run, she should scream, she should demand he send her home immediately. Instead, she heard herself say, Tell me about Genevieve. Lucian blinked in surprise. What? Your first wife. Tell me about her. Why, Ryan? Because I want to understand. You've lived 347 years. You've ruled a kingdom I didn't know existed. You've loved and lost 6 times over. That's not simple, Your Majesty. That's the most complicated story I've ever heard, and I've never been very good at simple. Something shifted in Lucian's expression, a crack in the carefully maintained ice, a flicker of the man beneath the king. She was extraordinary, brave, kind, utterly fearless in the face of what I was. She knew the truth from the beginning, chose me anyway, gave me 40 years of joy I didn't deserve. Why didn't you turn her? She didn't want it. Genevieve believed in living fully as human, experiencing aging mortality, the natural progression of life. She said immortality would steal the meaning from our time together. So I honored her choice and watched her die. Wren moved to stand before him, close enough to see the pain etched in every line of his perfect face. And now you're dying too. Not physically, but inside. You've stopped feeling because feeling hurts too much. How did you? I see it in your eyes, in the way you move through the world like a ghost. She reached up, hesitated, then gently touched his cheek. His skin was cool, but not cold, smooth, but not lifeless. You're not hollow yet, Lucian, but you're close. He stood frozen under her touch, and Wren saw something that looked like tears gathering in his eyes. Tears that wouldn't fall, couldn't fall, held back by centuries of practice control. I should send you away, he whispered. You're too perceptive, too brave, too much like her. This will end badly. Probably, Wren agreed, but I'm not leaving. Not yet. Why? She smiled, surprising herself. Because you need me. Not a simple, proper bride, not someone who'll ask nothing of you. You need someone who'll see you, really see you, and refuse to let you disappear into that hollow, nothing you are falling toward. That's not what I want. Yes, it is. You just don't remember how to want anything real anymore. They stood there in the garden of dead wives' moonlight, painting them in silver, the impossible weight of 3 centuries pressing down on one man's shoulders. And Wren made a decision that would change everything. 1 week, she said firmly. Show me your kingdom. Show me your life. Show me what it means to be the vampire king. At the end of 7 days, we'll both decide whether we can build something together. But Lucian, I won't be simple. I won't be proper. And I absolutely will not let you hide behind duty and protocol when what you need is someone to remind you that you're still alive. Lucian stared at her, emotions warring across his face, hope and fear, and something that might have been the first stirrings of genuine interest. You're making a mistake. That's my specialty, Wren said cheerfully. Now shall we discuss the appalling state of your estate management? Because from what I saw on the ride here, your infrastructure needs serious attention, your villages look neglected, and I suspect your staff is too terrified to tell you anything useful. Despite everything, the revelations, the grief, the impossibility of their situation, Lucian laughed. It was a rusty sound, as if he'd forgotten how, but it was real. Miss Fairborn, he said, and there was actual warmth in his voice now. I believe you may be the most dangerous woman I've ever met. Good, Wren replied. Simple and proper were never going to save you anyway. The next 3 days passed in a blur of discoveries. Lucian kept his word, showing Wren every aspect of his kingdom. They rode through villages where humans and vampires coexisted in careful balance, humans providing blood donations in exchange for protection, vampires using their strength to defend against bandits and predators. They visited great libraries where vampire scholars preserved knowledge spanning millennia. They attended court sessions where Lucian dispensed justice with surprising fairness. And everywhere they went, Ren challenged everything. "Why do vampires sit elevated while humans stand?" she asked during one court session. "Partnership requires equal footing, not hierarchy. Why are all your human villages located in valleys while vampires occupy the heights?" she demanded. "Separation breeds mistrust." "Why is education provided only to vampire children?" she pressed. "Human children should have equal access to knowledge." Lucian found himself defending practices he'd never questioned, then questioning them himself when her logic proved sound. She was relentless, brilliant, utterly unafraid of his authority. And more unsettling, she made him feel things he'd thought dead. Amusement at her sharp wit, admiration for her fearless intelligence, something warmer when she laughed at his dry observations, something painful when she looked at him with those green eyes that saw too much. On the fourth evening, they stood together in his private study reviewing maps of the kingdom. Ren had convinced him to implement her first reform, a joint human-vampire council to advise on governance. "You're changing things," he said quietly, watching her mark villages on the map. "I'm changing nothing," Ren replied without looking up. "I'm merely pointing out what you already knew but were too tired to address." "Is that what you think you're doing? Waking me up?" Now she did look up, and the directness of her gaze made his breath catch. "Yes, you've been sleepwalking through immortality, Lucian. Going through motions, fulfilling duties, existing but not living. Someone needed to shake you awake. And you appointed yourself to that role. Someone had to." She set down her pen, moving closer. "In 4 days, I've seen a king who rules fairly but distantly. A man who knows every detail of governing but has forgotten why governance matters. Someone who built walls so high around his heart that he can't remember what it feels like to let anyone in. You presume to understand me after 4 days. I presume nothing, I observe." Ren reached out her fingers, tracing the line of his jaw with a gentleness that made him freeze. "I see a man who has loved deeply and lost terribly, who has lived long enough to know that nothing lasts, who has concluded that the only way to survive eternity is to stop caring about anything at all. And what if you're right?" His voice came out rough. "What if I've forgotten how to care? What if there's nothing left in here to wake up? Then I'm wasting my time." Her smile was soft. "But I don't think I am. I think you're terrified that I might succeed, that I might make you feel again, because feeling means you can be hurt again." Lucian caught her wrist, gently pulling her hand away from his face before her touch could undo him completely. "You should leave, Ren. Go back to Lord Pemberton. Find a nice human man who can give you a normal life. I am 347 years old. I have nothing left to offer except more heartbreak." "Probably," she agreed, "but I'm not leaving. We still have 3 more days." Why stay when you know?" "Because someone has to believe you're worth saving," Ren interrupted, "even if you don't believe it yourself." The words hit him like a physical blow. When had anyone last believed he was worth saving? Before he could respond, a commotion erupted in the corridor outside. Running footsteps. Then his mother burst through the door, her face tight with alarm. "Lucian, we have a situation. The council has called an emergency session. One of the border villages was attacked. Attacked. Rogue vampires, apparently. The human residents are demanding protection. This could escalate into exactly the kind of conflict we've been trying to avoid." Lucian was already moving toward the door. "Summon the council. I'll meet them in the throne room within the hour." "I'm coming with you," Ren said. Both Lucian and Isadora turned to stare at her. "Absolutely not," Isadora said sharply. "Council sessions are restricted to people who have a stake in the kingdom's future," Ren interrupted. "I believe that includes me, given that I'm considering becoming your queen." "She comes." Lucian's voice cut through the argument with absolute finality. He turned to Ren, seeing the determination in her eyes. "But you will observe only. No speaking unless I give permission." "Understood." Ren's smile was pure mischief. "I make no promises." Despite the crisis, Lucian felt that rusty laugh building in his chest again. This woman, this impossible, brilliant, fearless woman, was going to destroy him or save him, and he was no longer certain which outcome he preferred. "Come then," he said, offering his arm. "Let me show you what it really means to rule the Northern Territories." As they walked toward the throne room, Ren slipped her hand into his, and Lucian felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Hope. Dangerous, terrifying, absolutely ridiculous hope. The throne room blazed with light and tension. All 12 vampire houses had sent representatives, their various factions clustering in groups that reflected centuries-old alliances. Human advisors stood along the walls. The air crackled with barely suppressed violence, vampires at their most dangerous, triggered by the scent of conflict and blood. Lucian took his throne and Ren was shocked to see the transformation. Gone was the man who had laughed at her observations. In his place sat a king, absolute, terrifying, radiating power that made every vampire in the room bow their heads in instinctive submission. This was the vampire king in truth. "Report," Lucian commanded. A vampire stepped forward, lean and dangerous looking, with scars that spoke of battles survived. Ren noticed his name when another council member addressed him, Commander Thorn. "Your Majesty, the village of Millbrook was attacked 3 nights ago. A rogue vampire pack killed 2 humans, turned 3 others without permission, and vanished before our patrol could respond." Murmurs rippled through the room. "The turned humans?" Lucian asked. "Destroyed themselves within hours," Thorn said. "New vampires who aren't properly mentored rarely survive the transition." "A mercy you decided without consulting me," Lucian said quietly, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Who authorized those executions?" Thorn hesitated. "Your Majesty, they were rabid. Beyond saving, we acted according to protocol. Protocol requires my approval for any execution within kingdom borders." Ren watched the exchange with growing unease. Something felt wrong about this. The timing, the location, the specific targeting of a village. This wasn't random violence. "Forgive me, Your Majesty." She spoke before she could stop herself. Every head in the room turned toward her. The sudden attention of dozens of vampire gazes was like being caught in searchlights. "Miss Fairborn," Lucian said, his tone carefully controlled, "I believe I instructed you to observe only." "You did, and I apologize for disobeying, but I have a question." Ren stood, forcing herself to meet those dozens of inhuman stares without flinching. "This attack happened 3 nights ago, yes? The same night I arrived at Ravencrest Keep." Silence. "And the village Millbrook, it's located on the main road from Lord Pemberton's estate. Is it not the route my carriage would have taken?" More silence, but now it was heavy with implications. "What are you suggesting?" Isidore asked coldly. "I'm suggesting this might not be random. Someone knew I was coming, knew when I would arrive, and timed an attack to create exactly this kind of crisis. A crisis that would demonstrate chaos and make the new bride question whether she truly wants to tie herself to a kingdom on the brink of collapse." Lucian's eyes narrowed. "To what end?" "To undermine you, Min," Ren said bluntly. "To make you look weak. To demonstrate that you cannot protect both vampires and humans. To prove that your attempts at coexistence are failures." Thorn laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The girl has a vivid imagination, Your Majesty. Next, she'll be accusing me of staging the attack myself." "Did you win?" Ren asked directly. The room erupted. Vampires surged to their feet, shouting accusations and denials. Human advisors pressed against walls, trying to become invisible. Isidora's face had gone pale with fury. Lucian raised one hand and silence crashed down like a physical force. "Commander Thorn," he said quietly, "answer the question." "Your Majesty, this is absurd. I have served you for 2 centuries. Answer the question." Thorn's face twisted with something ugly. "No, Your Majesty, I did not stage the attack. But I will say this, perhaps if you spent less time entertaining human brides and more time actually ruling, such attacks wouldn't happen in the first place." The challenge hung in the air like drawn steel. Before Lucian could respond, Ren felt a strange warmth spreading through her chest like sunlight breaking through clouds. Her hand went to the pendant she always wore, her mother's only legacy. The silver felt hot against her palm, and when she pulled it out to look, she gasped. The pendant was glowing. Soft blue-white light pulsed from the carved stone, growing brighter with each second. Ancient symbols she'd never noticed before seemed to writhe across its surface. "What is that?" Isidora's voice was sharp with alarm. Ren didn't know. She'd worn this pendant every day since she was a child, never thought twice about it. But now the light intensified and Ren felt something ancient awakening inside her. Power she'd never known she possessed. Knowledge she'd never learned but somehow understood. "You're lying," she said to Thorn, and her voice echoed strangely. "You staged the attack. You've been planning this for months. You want to prove that Lucian's coexistence policy is a failure. You want to force a choice, segregation, or chaos." Thorn's face went white. "How could you possibly—" "Because I can feel it. Your guilt, your anger, your ambition." Ren stared at her glowing pendant in shock. What is this? What's happening to me? Lucian was on his feet, moving toward her with inhuman speed. He grabbed her wrist, staring at the pendant, and his face went absolutely white. That symbol, he whispered. That's impossible. What symbol? He turned the pendant over with shaking hands, pointing to the carved design she'd always assumed was decorative scrollwork. But now glowing with blue-white light, she could see what it really was. A crown, thorns and crescent moons. The exact design of the crown sitting on Lucian's throne. This is the Queen's seal, Lucian said, his voice barely audible. It's been lost for nearly 300 years, since Genevieve died. The room erupted in chaos again, but Ren barely heard it. Her mind was reeling, trying to process impossible information. Genevieve? First wife. But how she had a daughter, Ren whispered. A daughter she gave to a human family to raise, to protect from vampire politics and the burden of the crown. How do you know that? Isidore demanded. I don't know, I can feel it. Feel her, like memories that aren't mine but somehow are. Ren looked up at Lucian, seeing the shock and hope warring in his expression. I'm her descendant, Genevieve's bloodline. That's why your compulsion doesn't work on me. Lucian released her wrist slowly, as if afraid she might disappear. Genevieve had a daughter, I knew that. A beautiful child named Elizabeth. But she died, fever took her when she was barely 2. I watched Genevieve bury her. No. The word came from somewhere deep inside. Ren carried on that strange certainty. The child didn't die. Genevieve saved her, sent her away with trusted servants, faked her death to protect her from those who would use a half-human heir as a weapon. Isadora moved closer. The timing is convenient. You arrive exactly when Lucien needs a bride carrying proof of connection to his first wife. I didn't choose to come here, Ren said. Lord Pemberton received your summons and sent me. I had no say in the matter. This pendant has been in my family for generations. My mother gave it to me before she died. I thought it was just a keepsake. Lucian moved to his throne, sinking into it as if his legs could no longer support him. If you are Genevieve's descendant, if her bloodline runs through you, then you have a claim to this throne. More than that, you have a destiny you never asked for. I don't want a throne, Ren said quietly. I just wanted to matter to someone. The confession hung in the air, raw and honest. Lucian looked up at her, and something in his expression softened. Then we are not so different, you and I, both carrying legacies we didn't choose. Your Majesty, one of the council members stepped forward, an ancient vampire with white hair. If the girl is truly of Genevieve's line, then the prophecy— There is no prophecy, Lucian said sharply. There is. The old vampire's voice was firm. Genevieve herself whispered it in her final hours. When the king grows cold and the kingdom falls to shadow, the first queen's blood will return to restore what was lost. She was dying, Lucian snapped. She said many things that made no sense. Did she? Isidora's voice was thoughtful. Or were we simply not ready to hear them? Ren's head spun with too much information. Prophecies, destinies, queens and bloodlines, and ancient magic. I need air, she said abruptly. She turned and fled. Ren found herself back in the memorial garden, standing before Genevieve's monument. She touched the stone, and the moment her fingers made contact, the world shifted. Not physically, but somehow she was seeing through different eyes, feeling different emotions, living a memory that wasn't her own. Genevieve stood in this very spot, heavily pregnant, tears streaming down a face that looked heartbreakingly similar to Ren's own. Lucian was younger, showing emotions Ren had never seen him express. Joy, wonder, terrified hope. Promise me, Genevieve said, one hand on her swollen belly. If anything happens to me, if politics make our child a target, promise you'll let her go. Let her live as human, free from all of this. Nothing will happen to you, Lucian said fiercely. You can't control everything, my love. Not even the vampire king can hold back death. She cupped his face gently. Promise me. Our daughter deserves a choice, deserves to live without the burden of being both human and vampire royalty. I promise. The memory shifted, Elizabeth 2 years old laughing as she chased butterflies. But she was coughing, her small face flushed with fever. She's dying, Genevieve whispered. We let her die here publicly, so no one suspects. And then we send her away in secret to my cousin's family. We give her a chance at life, even if it means losing her ourselves. Lucian's face crumpled. I'm not asking. I'm begging. Genevieve's tears fell onto the child's fevered face. Save our daughter, even if it means breaking both our hearts. The memory released Ren with a gasp. She stumbled back from the monument, her own tears streaming freely. The pendant at her throat pulsed once warm and comforting. She saved you. Lucian's voice came from behind her, rough with emotion. Sent you away. Let me believe you were dead so I wouldn't search for you. Ren turned to find him standing in the garden's entrance, his face ravaged with old grief made fresh. You mourned a child who wasn't really dead. For 280 years, his laugh was broken. And all that time my daughter lived, had children, grandchildren, eventually became you. I'm sorry. Don't be. He moved closer. Genevieve was right to save you. The vampire world would have destroyed an innocent child. But you lost so much, and gained something I didn't know I needed. Lucian stopped in front of her. Do you understand what this means, Ren? You're not just Genevieve's descendant. You're Elizabeth's descendant. Your blood, your family. What does that make us? Ren asked. I'm not really your daughter. 9 generations separate us. No. Lucian reached out slowly and tucked a loose curl behind her ear with devastating gentleness. Your family. Blood of my blood across centuries. And more than that, you're the woman who walked into my dying world and made me want to live again. The confession hung between them, fragile and terrifying. Before Ren could find words, Isadora's voice cut through the garden's peace. Lucian, we have a problem. The problem, it turned out, was considerably worse than a simple attack. In the throne room, new reports had arrived. 3 more villages attacked. 2 vampire safe houses burned. A warehouse storing blood donations destroyed. And everywhere the same message: the old ways are dead. Choose your side. This is coordinated, Lucian said, studying the maps. Someone is trying to force a war. They want chaos, Ren said quietly. All eyes turned to her. In chaos, extremists thrive. Everyone in the middle, everyone trying to build coexistence, becomes a casualty. One of the council members nodded slowly. This is exactly the pattern we've seen before. 30 years ago, when your father tried integration policies, similar attacks began. He pulled back and the violence stopped. Proving that giving in to terrorists only encourages them, Ren said sharply. Easy to say when you're not the one watching your people die. I'm trying to help, Ren said. I can see that doing the same thing you've always done will get you the same results, which appears to be periodic violence in a kingdom divided against itself. And what would you suggest? Look, Ren moved to the map. Every attack has targeted places where vampires and humans interact peacefully. The attackers are strategically destroying symbols of cooperation. Lucian leaned forward. So we rebuild them, publicly, defiantly. More than that, Ren's mind raced. We accelerate integration, create joint patrols, establish shared governance councils, make it impossible for either side to retreat into isolation. You'll trigger the very war you're trying to prevent. Or you'll expose the extremists, Ren countered, force them to show their hands. Right now, they're operating in shadows. But if you make integration the law of the land, anyone opposing it has to come out of hiding. And when they do, we crush them. Lucian finished, a dangerous smile crossing his face. Completely, publicly, making an example that will last centuries. The room erupted in argument. Half the council supported the plan. The other half thought it was suicide. And through it all, Ren watched Lucian. The transformation was subtle but profound. 5 days ago, he'd been going through motions. Now his eyes blazed with genuine engagement. He argued passionately, listened to objections, and adapted his approach. He was coming back to life. And Ren realized with a shock that she was falling in love with him. Not the broken vampire who had greeted her, but the man underneath, the one who had loved deeply enough to mourn for centuries, who had built a kingdom on principles of fairness, who was capable of changing ancient patterns when shown a better way. The realization should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like coming home. The council session lasted until nearly dawn. By the time Lucian dismissed his advisors, they had hammered out the framework for what Ren had privately started calling the Integration Accord. It was bold, controversial, absolutely terrifying, but it was also necessary, the only path forward that didn't lead to endless cycles of violence. You should rest, Lucian said as the last council member departed. You've been awake for nearly 24 hours. So have you. I don't require sleep the way you do. He rubbed his face tiredly, though I confess I miss it. Sleeping was one of the better parts of being human. They walked together through corridors slowly brightening with approaching day. Servants were beginning their morning routines, and Ren noticed vampire and human staff working side by side with easy familiarity. Can I ask you something? Ren said as they reached the guest wing. Anything. Why did you stop feeling? I mean, really, what happened to make you shut down so completely? Lucian was quiet for so long that Ren thought he wouldn't answer. Then slowly he began to speak. After Genevieve died, I threw myself into ruling. Work was easier than grief. I remarried thinking partnership would ease the loneliness. But I couldn't love Isabella the way I'd loved Genevieve. She knew. Near the end, she told me it was all right, that she'd known from the beginning she was second choice. Can you imagine spending 25 years with someone who loved you, but not enough? He leaned against the wall. With Catherine, I tried harder, loved her fiercely, desperately. But she was fragile in ways I didn't understand until too late. The weight of being a vampire's wife, of knowing she would age while I stayed young, it broke something in her. The accident that killed her wasn't entirely accidental. Ren's breath caught. I don't know for certain, but the horse was well trained, the gait wasn't difficult, and she'd made comments about feeling like a burden. I've spent 164 years wondering if I loved her to death. Lucian. With Ophelia, I thought turning her would solve everything. She begged for immortality, but the transformation broke her mind. The bloodlust, the horror of what she'd become, she went mad. Killed 3 people before I could stop her. And I had to end her, put her down like a rabid animal even though she was my wife. His voice had gone hollow. Margaret and Anne were smarter. They left before I could destroy them. So you decided no more love, Ren said softly. Just a simple, proper bride who would remain at arm's length. Yes, that's the saddest thing I've ever heard. Lucian looked at her, and Ren saw the full depth of his pain, 3 centuries of loss and guilt. I'm broken, Ren. You should leave. Find someone who can give you a real future, not just another chapter in a tragedy. No, no, no. Ren moved closer. I'm not leaving. And do you want to know why? Because you're not broken. You're grieving. There's a difference. I've been grieving for 300 years. Because you've never let yourself heal. You jump from loss to loss, trying to replace what you lost instead of processing the grief. Genevieve died and you married Isabella before you'd finished mourning. On and on, using new love to cover old wounds that never got a chance to close. Lucian stared at her. You presume to understand. I understand loss, Ren interrupted. I lost my mother when I was 6, and I learned something: grief doesn't have a timeline. But it does require acknowledgement. You have to face what you've lost, feel the pain fully, and then let it change you instead of define you. And you think I haven't faced my pain? I think you've run from it, hidden it behind duty and power and the armor of being the vampire king. Ren reached up, cupping his face. But you don't have to run anymore. I see you, Lucian, all of you, the grief and the guilt and the fear. And I'm not afraid of it. You should be, his voice cracked. Everyone I love dies or leaves or goes mad. I'm poison, Ren. Or Bart, Ren said gently. You've been so afraid of loss that you've never let yourself fully be present in love. You held back with Isabella, smothered Catherine, forced Ophelia into something she wasn't ready for. You created self-fulfilling prophecies. The words hit him like physical blows. She watched 3 centuries of assumptions crumble. I don't know how to do this differently, he whispered. Then we'll learn together. You're asking me to try again, to love again, to risk. I'm asking you to be brave enough to be vulnerable, Ren interrupted, to stop hiding behind your crown and your certainty that you're cursed, to be with me, really, with me, present and open and willing to build something new. Lucian's eyes were swimming with unshed tears. What if I fail again? What if I destroy you too? What if you don't? Ren smiled through her own tears. What if this time is different because we're going into it with eyes open, aware of the patterns, committed to breaking them? They stood in the corridor as dawn light began filtering through windows. 2 people separated by species and centuries, but connected by something that felt like destiny. I'm terrified, Lucian admitted. So am I. You're 26 years old. You could live 50, maybe 60 more years. That's barely a moment in my existence. And losing you, his voice broke completely. Would hurt, Ren finished. But Lucian, what if the alternative is worse? What if living without love, going through centuries, never letting anyone close, dying inside little by little? What if that's the real tragedy? Lucian pulled her into his arms suddenly, desperately. His face buried in her hair, his body shaking with arms he'd held back for decades. I don't want to be hollow, he choked out. I don't want to fade into nothing. I want to live. I want to feel. He pulled back just enough to look at her. I want you. God help me. I want you so much it terrifies me. Then have me, Ren whispered. Not as a simple bride, not as a proper duchess, not as anything except what I am, a woman who sees you, loves you, and believes you're worth fighting for. The kiss when it came was nothing like Wren had imagined. It wasn't passionate or desperate or wild. It was gentle, achingly, heartbreakingly gentle. Lucian kissed her like she was made of glass and hope and promises he'd never dared make before. His cool lips warm against hers, his hands cradling her face as if she was precious beyond words. When they finally parted, both breathless, despite Lucian's lack of need for air, Wren saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Life. Real, genuine, terrifying life. Stay, he said simply. Not for a week, not for propriety. Stay because you want to. Because you choose this, choose me with full knowledge of what you are accepting. I stay, Wren said. I choose this. I choose you. And in that corridor, with dawn breaking over a kingdom on the brink of revolution, they made a promise more binding than any marriage vows. They would face whatever came together. The next 3 days passed in a blur of activity. Wren threw herself into estate reforms with fierce determination. She visited every vampire and human settlement within a day's ride, speaking with farmers and merchants, healers and teachers, listening to grievances and taking careful notes. She reopened the still room, a space that had been locked since Genevieve's death, and began collecting herbs and remedies with Mrs. Blackwood, an elderly servant who remembered the first queen. She had such gentle hands, Mrs. Blackwood said, tears streaming down her weathered face as they sorted dried lavender. Used to make remedies for anyone who asked, vampire or human, noble or peasant. Tell me about her, Wren said softly, and Mrs. Blackwood did. Stories poured out: Genevieve's laughter, her fierce intelligence, her stubborn insistence on treating everyone with equal dignity, how she'd defied vampire tradition by learning human medicine, how she'd loved Lucian with a devotion that transcended death itself. You're very like her, you know, Mrs. Blackwood said finally. The same fire, the same refusal to accept the world as it is. That evening, Wren shared everything with Lucian over dinner in his private chambers. He listened with an intensity that made her aware of every word. Genevieve would be proud of you, he said when she finished describing her plans for expanding the still room into a full medical training center. She always dreamed of creating a place where vampire and human healers could learn from each other. Then let's make it real, Wren said. Lucian reached across the table, taking her hand. The gesture was becoming familiar. This easy touching, the constant need for physical connection that came from centuries of being starved for genuine affection. There's something you should know, he said quietly. Something I haven't told anyone, not even my mother. Wren's heart stuttered. What is it? I'm dying. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. What? Not immediately, not soon perhaps, but vampires aren't truly immortal. We're just very long-lived. After 3 or 4 centuries, we begin to fade. The ability to feel emotions goes first, then the ability to taste anything beyond blood, then the will to continue existing. We call it the hollowing. Wren's mind raced. How long? I have perhaps 5 years before it's irreversible. Maybe less. I've already lost so much: the ability to enjoy food, to appreciate music the way I once did, to feel joy or sorrow at appropriate intensities. It's like living through thick glass, watching the world, but not quite touching it. Is there a cure? Lucian's smile was sad. There's a legend. If a vampire of royal blood finds their true equal, not a subject, not a companion, but a genuine partner who can match their soul, the bonding can reverse the hollowing, can restore feeling, extend life, create something stronger than either individual alone. Then that's what we do, Wren said immediately. We bond. No, Lucian's voice was firm. I won't force that on you. Bonding means you would live centuries watching everyone you know die. It means giving up your humanity, not through transformation, but through commitment. It means tying your life force to mine so completely that my pain becomes yours, my burden becomes yours. And you think I can't handle that? I think you're 26 years old and you deserve a choice. A real choice made with full understanding of the pet. Lucian's grip on her hand tightened. Genevieve chose mortality, chose to live fully human and die naturally. I honored that choice then. I'll honor yours now. Wren stood, moving around the table to kneel before his chair so they were eye to eye. Listen to me very carefully, Lucian Ravencrest. I am not Genevieve. I love that she was. I honor her choices. I carry her bloodline with pride. But I am not her. My choices are my own. I know that. Do because it sounds like you're making decisions for me based on what she chose 300 years ago. But I'm not asking for the same life she had. I'm asking for a partnership, a real one where we face challenges together instead of you protecting me from everything difficult. I just want you to have options. I have options, Wren interrupted. I could leave, go back to Lord Pemberton, marry some human merchant, live a normal, quiet life, and die in 50 years having never known what we could have built together. That's an option. Or I could stay the bond with you, face whatever comes, and build something that matters. That's also an option, and I'm choosing the second one. You don't understand what you're accepting. Then explain it to me. Stop protecting me from information and treat me like the partner you claim to want. Tell me everything about bonding, the risks, the requirements, the consequences. And then trust me to make my own damn choice. Lucian stared at her, and slowly that beautiful broken smile spread across his face. You are extraordinary. I'm stubborn. There's a difference. No, he said, pulling her up into his lap with vampire strength, cradling her close. You're extraordinary. And you're right. I've been trying to protect you, making choices for you just like I did with the others. Old patterns die hard. Then let's kill them, Wren said firmly. Tell me about bonding, everything. So he did. He explained the ritual ancient vampire magic that bound two souls together, creating a connection that transcended physical death. How it required absolute willingness from both parties could never be forced, and created a link so deep that each could feel the other's emotions, share thoughts, even sense when the other was in danger. He described the costs, extended life for the human partner, but not true immortality. Centuries of watching mortal friends die, the burden of sharing a vampire's darker nature. And he spoke of the risks if the bond formed improperly or between incompatible souls. It could drive both participants mad, create a connection so intense it burned out both lives within years instead of extending them. So it's dangerous, Wren said when he finished, but also potentially wonderful. A genuine partnership that goes deeper than any human marriage could. Yes. And you're afraid to try it because you're convinced you'll somehow ruin it. Lucian flinched. When you put it that way, it sounds like fear masquerading as nobility, Wren finished gently. I understand the fear, but I'm asking you to be brave with me, to try something you've never attempted before, real vulnerability, real partnership, real trust, that I know what I'm accepting. They sat in silence, the weight of the decision hanging between them. Finally, Lucian spoke. If we do this, if we bond, and something goes wrong, if I lose you to madness or death, I won't survive it. Not as anything worth being. I'll become hollow completely. Then we make sure nothing goes wrong, Wren said simply. We go into this carefully, thoughtfully, with every preparation. We don't rush. We build our foundation first, and when we're both absolutely certain, then we bond. You make it sound simple. It's not simple, but it's worth doing right. Wren cupped his face, making him meet her eyes. I love you, Lucian. Not the vampire king, not Genevieve's widower. You the man who carries 3 centuries of grief but still tries to rule fairly. Who holds himself responsible for every loss but never claims credit for any victory. Who is so terrified of hurting me that he's willing to sacrifice his own happiness to keep me safe. I love you too, Lucian whispered. Terrifyingly much. In ways I don't understand and can't control and didn't think I was still capable of feeling. Then that's enough, Wren said. For now, that's enough. We'll figure out the rest together. They held each other as night deepened outside, two souls separated by species and time, but connected by something older than either the simple human need to be known, to be loved, to matter to someone else. And neither of them saw the shadow at the window, listening to every word. On the 7th day, exactly 1 week since Wren's arrival, Isadora summoned them both to the throne room. The dowager stood before the 12 council seats, her face carved from ice and authority. Behind her, the assembled vampire houses whispered among themselves, and the tension in the air was thick enough to taste. My son, Isadora said formally. Miss Fairborn, thank you for attending. Mother, Lucian replied, equally formal. What's this about? A decision must be made. Isadora's voice carried through the chamber. This week has been illuminating. Miss Fairborn has demonstrated abilities none of us anticipated. She carries Genevieve's bloodline. She bears the Queen's seal. She has influenced Walsey-inspired reforms and apparently captured your heart completely. Wren felt Lucian stiffen beside her. But, Isadora continued, she is also human, fragile, mortal, untrained in vampire politics. And if rumors are true, you are considering bonding with her, an irreversible decision that will tie our kingdom's future to a woman who arrived here less than a week ago. My private decisions are none of the council's concern, Lucian said coldly. Your decisions as king are absolutely our concern. Isidora's eyes flashed. A bonding affects the entire kingdom. If it fails, if she cannot handle the connection, if the ritual goes wrong, you could be lost to us. The hollowing accelerated, the throne left vacant, our people left leaderless in the middle of a crisis. Ren's stomach dropped. She hadn't considered that how their personal choices could affect thousands of subjects. What are you asking? Lucian's voice was dangerous. A choice, Isidora stepped aside. The council has deliberated. We offer you two options. First, send Miss Fairborn away. Marry a vampire noble who understands our world. Secure the kingdom through traditional means. Continue ruling as you have for 3 centuries. Absolutely not. Or, Isidore continued as if he hadn't spoken, prove that she is worthy. Prove that bonding with her won't destroy you. Prove that this human woman can truly be the queen our kingdom needs. How time? Ren asked, finding her voice despite her fear. Isidora's smile was sharp and cold. The Trial of Flames, an ancient ritual that tests whether a soul can withstand bonding with vampire royalty. It's brutal, dangerous, and many have died attempting it. But those who survive emerge changed, stronger, wiser, capable of sharing the burden of the crown. Lucian moved in front of Ren protectively. Absolutely not. I won't risk her life to satisfy political requirements. Then send her away, Isidora said simply. Choose the crown over your heart. Rule alone, die hollow, but keep our kingdom stable. The ultimatum hung in the air like a sword. Crown or heart, duty or love. The same choice that had destroyed Lucian's relationships before. Ren stepped out from behind Lucian, her heart pounding, but her voice steady. I'll do it. I'll take the trial. No, Lucian said immediately. Yes. Ren turned to face him. You said you wanted a real partner. Someone who could share your burdens. This is me choosing that. Proving I'm serious. Showing both you and the council that I'm not some fragile human girl playing at being queen. You could die. I could, or I could prove I'm strong enough to stand beside you. To share your life, to help carry the weight you've been bearing alone for too long. Ren took his hand, squeezing tight. Trust me, Lucian. Trust that I know what I'm choosing. She saw the war in his eyes, fear and hope and desperate love all tangled together. Saw him struggling with every instinct that screamed to protect her. And then she saw him make the choice that changed everything. If she takes the trial, Lucian said, not looking away from Ren's face, I take it with her. If there's risk, we face it together. If there's pain, we share it. No more protecting her from my world. We build our partnership or fail together. That's not how the trial works, Isidora said sharply. Then we change the ritual. Lucian finally turned to face his mother, and his expression was pure royal command. I am king. I've been king for over 300 years, and I'm telling you that if Ren faces judgment, I face it beside her. That's my condition. Accept it or we walk away from all of this right now. The council erupted in shocked whispers. Isidora stared at her son as if seeing him truly for the first time in decades. Then slowly she smiled, and there was genuine warmth in it. Very well, she said. The Trial of Flames will be modified for joint participation. You will face it together. And when you emerge, if you emerge, you will be bonded in truth, king and queen partners in every sense. Lucian squeezed Ren's hand so hard it almost hurt. When, Ren asked. 3 days, Isidore replied. Time enough to prepare yourselves. Time enough to say goodbye if necessary. And time enough to prove to this council and kingdom that what you're building is worth the risk. As they left the throne room together, Ren felt the full weight of what she'd agreed to settling over her. 3 days until she either proved herself worthy of standing beside a vampire king or died trying. But when she looked up at Lucian and saw the fierce pride and love in his eyes, she knew she'd made the right choice. Some things were worth fighting for. Some people were worth risking everything to keep. And maybe, just maybe, a simple orphan girl and a broken immortal king could build something extraordinary together if they were brave enough to try. The preparation chamber was ancient stone and flickering candlelight. Ren sat on a bench carved from black marble, watching Isidora prepare ritual implements with movements that spoke of centuries of practice. Silver bowls, crystal vials filled with liquids that glowed faintly in the darkness. Herbs that smelled of earth and smoke, and something older. Something that made the hair on Ren's arms stand up in primal recognition. You're afraid, Isidora said without looking up from her work. Terrified, Ren admitted. No point in lying to a woman who'd lived 600 years. Good. Fear keeps you sharp, keeps you honest. Isadora set down a vial and turned to face her. But I need to know, but are you doing this for him or for yourself? Ren considered the question seriously. Both. I love him. I want to be with him. But also I want to matter. I want my life to mean something beyond just surviving. And if I can help build something better, something that lasts, then maybe the risk is worth it. You sound like her, Isadora said softly. Genevieve, she said almost exactly those words before her coronation. Isadora was quiet for a long moment. Then she moved to sit beside Ren, and for the first time the ancient vampire looked almost human. Tired, concerned, afraid for someone she was beginning to care about. The trial of flames tests the soul's capacity to withstand bonding with immortal power. It forces you to confront your deepest fears, your greatest shames, your most painful memories, everything you have ever tried to hide from yourself. And it does this while vampire magic burns through your body, changing you at the cellular level. Changing me how? Not transformation, not into vampire, but evolution, pushing human limitations to their absolute edge. Extended lifespan, heightened senses, the ability to share thoughts and emotions with your bonded partner. But the process, Isadora's expression darkened. It feels like dying, like being torn apart and rebuilt. Many can't withstand it. Their minds break before their bodies do. And Lucian is doing this with me. He insists. Modified ritual, shared burden, two souls facing judgment together instead of separately. It's never been done before. Ren thought about facing her worst memories while Lucian witnessed them. About the orphan girl who always felt unwanted, the young woman who learned to hide her intelligence, the 26 years of feeling like she was too much and not enough simultaneously. He'll see everything, won't he? Every ugly truth about me. Yes, and you'll see his 347 years of grief, guilt, failure, and the slow erosion of hope. Can you bear that? Could she hold the weight of centuries of sorrow and not be crushed by it? I have to try, Ren said finally. Because if I don't, if I walk away now, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering what we could have built together. Isadora reached out, taking Ren's hand in hers. The gesture was shocking in its gentleness. My son loves you. Really loves you in ways I haven't seen since Genevieve. But love isn't always enough. Sometimes the kindest thing is letting go. Do you want me to leave? I want you to survive, Isadora said fiercely. I want my son to have the partner he deserves. I want this kingdom to find peace. But more than anything, I want both of you to emerge from that ritual chamber alive and whole. The door opened. Lucian stood in the entrance dressed in ceremonial robes of deep crimson and black. His dark hair was pulled back, his face carved from determination and fear in equal measure. When his eyes found Ren, something in his expression softened. It's time, he said quietly. The trial chamber existed in the oldest part of Ravencrest Keep, deep underground, where stone remembered the birth of mountains. They descended stairs that seemed to go on forever past levels of the castle Ren hadn't known existed. The air grew colder with each step, thick with power that made her skin prickle. Torches lined the walls, but their light seemed absorbed by the darkness rather than pushing it back. At the bottom, massive doors stood open, revealing a circular chamber carved entirely from black crystal. Symbols covered every surface, ancient vampire script that hurt to look at, directly geometric patterns that seemed to shift when viewed peripherally, and at the chamber's center, a circle of fire that burned without fuel or smoke. The 12 vampire houses stood in silent witness around the room's perimeter. Human representatives clustered nervously near the doors, and in the circle's center, two silver chairs faced each other across the flames. The ritual is simple, Isadora announced, her voice echoing with formal authority. Two souls enter the flames. They face judgment, testing of character, strength of will, capacity for partnership. Those who are found worthy emerge bonded. Those who are not, she paused, do not emerge at all. Ren felt Lucian take her hand, his cool fingers intertwining with hers. We can still stop this, he whispered. I can dismiss the council. Choose you without their blessing. And watch yourself die hollow in 5 years knowing you could have been saved. Ren shook her head. No, we do this together. We face it together. We emerge together. Or we don't emerge at all. Then we don't, but at least we'll have tried. Lucian's smile was heartbreaking and beautiful. How did I live 300 years without you? Badly, from what I've heard. Despite everything, he laughed, that rusty, wonderful sound that meant he was truly feeling again. They walked to the circle together, still holding hands. The flames were taller up close, reaching toward the vaulted ceiling in tongues of blue and silver fire. Heat radiated from them, but it wasn't the heat of normal fire. This was something older, something that burned soul rather than flesh. They sat facing each other across the flames. Isadora began chanting in a language Ren didn't recognize, something ancient and guttural that made the crystal walls vibrate. The other vampires joined in their voices, creating harmonies that shouldn't have been possible, weaving together into a sound that was beautiful and terrible, and absolutely inhuman. The flames rose higher. Ren met Lucian's eyes across the fire and saw her own fear reflected back, but also trust love, desperate hope that this would work. "I love you," she mouthed. "I love you," he mouthed back. The flames engulfed them both. Pain. Not physical pain, though. Ren's body screamed as if it were being flayed alive. This was deeper soul pain, the kind that came from every wound she'd ever tried to hide being ripped open simultaneously. She was 6 years old, standing at her mother's deathbed, watching the only person who loved her slip away into death. The helplessness, the abandonment, the certainty that she would always be alone. She was 12, overhearing Lord Pemberton tell his wife that she was a burden and unwanted responsibility. She was 16, falling in love for the first time with a boy who kissed her sweetly and then laughed with his friends about the strange orphan girl. She was 20, watching other girls her age marry for love, while she was paraded before increasingly desperate suitors who wanted her modest inheritance but not her difficult personality. Every rejection, every moment of feeling too much or not enough, every time she'd hidden her intelligence, dampened her spirit, made herself smaller to fit into spaces that would never truly accommodate her. And through it all, through every painful memory, she felt Lucian experiencing it with her. Felt his rage at those who had hurt her, his grief at her loneliness, his fierce protectiveness. But the flames weren't done. Now she was seeing through his eyes, experiencing his memories drowning in 347 years of accumulated sorrow. Genevieve's death, watching her grow old, watching her weaken, holding her hand as she took her last breath while he remained unchanged. The howling grief that followed. Isabella's quiet suffering, seeing himself through her eyes, understanding how she'd known from the beginning that he didn't love her enough. Catherine's fragility, the way his intense love had overwhelmed her, crushed her under expectations she couldn't meet. Ophelia's madness, her screams as the bloodlust took her begging him to end her suffering, the feeling of his hand driving the stake through her heart while she thanked him with her dying breath. And through all of it, the slow erosion of his capacity to feel. Like color draining from the world one shade at a time, until everything was gray and he couldn't remember what joy tasted like. Ren felt herself drowning in his grief, centuries of it-crushing weight that no soul should have to carry alone. But she wasn't alone, and neither was he. Through the flames, through the pain, through every terrible memory, she felt Lucian's presence supporting her just as she supported him. Two souls holding each other up through the worst moments of their respective lives, sharing burdens that had been too heavy to carry solo. The flames burned hotter. Now came the testing. Images flashed through Ren's mind, possible futures, terrible choices, scenarios designed to break her resolve. She saw herself old and dying while Lucian remained young, the same pattern that had destroyed him before. Saw him holding her withered hand, grief etched into every line of his perfect face, preparing to mourn for centuries. "Would you turn back?" a voice asked, her own voice, or maybe the flames speaking through her. "Knowing this pain awaits him, would you spare him by leaving now?" "No," Ren said aloud, and her voice echoed through the chamber. "Because 40 years of genuine partnership is worth more than centuries of safe distance." Genevieve knew that. Now so do I. The scene shifted. She saw their kingdom torn by war, vampires and humans, slaughtering each other, while she and Lucian watched helplessly, their reforms used as kindling for violence. Would you abandon your ideals to maintain peace? Accept segregation, injustice, the old broken ways? "No," Ren said firmly. "Some things are worth fighting for, worth dying for, worth facing conflict rather than accepting wrong just because it's easier." Again, the flames shifted. She saw herself transformed, not physically but spiritually. Saw herself becoming hard, cold, ruthless in the way that ruling sometimes demanded. Saw the bright, fierce girl she'd been eroded by centuries of difficult decisions until she was as hollow as Lucian had been. Would you sacrifice your humanity to keep him, become something other than yourself to fit the role? And here Ren paused, because this was the real question, the core of everything. Could she remain herself, fully herself, while also being queen? Or would the crown eventually consume her? She thought about Genevieve, who had remained human in every sense until her death, who had chosen mortality over immortality, authentic self over eternal power. She thought about Lucian, who had spent 3 centuries trying to be what everyone expected instead of what he needed to be. And she made a choice that would change everything. I refuse, Ren said, and power crackled through her voice. I refuse to become vampire. I refuse to give up my humanity. I refuse to transform into something other than what I am, just to fit an ancient ritual. If bonding requires me to stop being myself, then bonding is the wrong answer. The flames roared. Isidora's chanting faltered. The assembled vampires gasped in shock. And Lucian across the flames, Lucian was staring at her with an expression of absolute wonder. "What are you doing?" he mouthed. "Changing the rules," Ren mouthed back. She stood still within the circle of flames, her body screaming in protest, but her will absolute. "I will be queen as human. I will bond with Lucian while remaining mortal. I will accept extended life, a few centuries perhaps, but I won't surrender my essential nature. If that's not possible, if the ritual can't accommodate that, then we'll find another way." "That's not how the trial works," Isidora shouted. "You can't simply refuse." "Can't I?" Ren turned to face the dowager, and she felt power flowing through her. Not vampire power, but something older. The queen's seal at her throat burned hot against her skin. Genevieve chose mortality. She chose partnership on her own terms. Why can't I do the same? Because Genevieve didn't bond. She married Lucian, loved him, died human, but they were never soul bonded. The magic wouldn't allow it while she remained mortal. Then we changed the magic. Lucian stood as well, and when he spoke, his voice carried absolute royal command. "My father told me once that vampire magic serves the crown, not the reverse. If the ritual cannot accommodate what we need, then we modify the ritual." "That's impossible." "Nothing is impossible for those with enough will and enough love." Lucian moved through the flames as if they were morning mist, crossing to stand beside Ren. His hand found hers, their fingers intertwining. "I've spent 300 years following rules that broke my heart, following traditions that isolated me, accepting limitations that made me miserable. No more. We do this our way or not at all." The flames around them began to change. Blue and silver shifted to gold and white. The burning sensation that had been agony transformed into something warm, almost gentle. And Ren felt something clicking into place, not just in her body, but in the very fabric of reality around them. The magic was listening. "Bonding traditionally requires transformation," Isidora said slowly, her voice filled with wonder and fear. "But there are legends-old stories about ancient queens who walked between worlds, human enough to understand mortal suffering, vampire enough to share immortal burdens. The chronicles call them bridge queens." "Can it be done?" Lucian asked. "I don't know. It's been attempted perhaps 3 times in all vampire history. Only once successfully, and she went mad after 200 years unable to bear existing between two natures." "Then we'll do it better," Ren said with more confidence than she felt. "We'll build in safeguards, limits, ways to remain grounded in humanity even while accessing vampire magic." "You're talking about rewriting fundamental magical law." "I'm talking about choosing partnership over power," Ren interrupted. "About refusing to let ancient traditions dictate modern happiness. About being brave enough to try something new instead of repeating old patterns that led to tragedy." She turned to Lucian, ignoring the assembled witnesses, focusing only on the man before her. "I love you. I want eternity with you, or as much eternity as we can claim. But I won't stop being myself to get it. I won't transform into someone else just to fit expectations. If you want me, you get all of me: human heart, mortal perspective, limited, lifespan extended, but not infinite." "That's all I've ever wanted," Lucian said, and his voice cracked with emotion. "Not a vampire consort, not an immortal queen, just you, exactly as you are, for as long as we can have. Then let's make it work." They kissed in the center of the flames, and the magic surged around them, not destroying but creating, building something new from old power, weaving human and vampire nature together in patterns that had never existed before. Ren felt changes rippling through her body. Not transformation, she was still human, still mortal in essential ways, but evolution. Her senses sharpened until she could hear individual heartbeats from the watching crowd. Her strength increased until she felt like she could bear any weight. Her lifespan stretched before her, not eternity, but centuries enough to build a legacy. And most importantly, she felt Lucian, not just beside her, but inside her, his thoughts brushing against hers, his emotions flowing through her awareness, his soul intertwining with hers until they were separate but also unified. The bonding was complete. The flames died. Ren and Lucian stood in the center of the now darkened circle, holding each other both alive and whole, and changed in ways that would take years to fully understand. Isadora approached slowly, her ancient face showing an expression Ren had never seen, hope mixed with tears. It worked, the Dowager whispered. After 600 years, I never thought I'd see a successful bridge queen bonding. But you did it. You both did it. Does this mean, Ren's voice was hoarse. It means you are queen, Isadora said formally, then smiled. And my son is finally truly alive again. But there was no time for celebration. Even as the council began approaching to offer congratulations and oaths of fealty, alarms sounded throughout the castle. Bells rang in patterns that spoke of emergency danger invasion. Lucian's head snapped up, new awareness flooding through their bond. Attack. The south wall, multiple breach points. Who? Ren asked, though she already suspected. Commander Thorn. Lucian's voice was granite hard. He's making his move now while we're vulnerable, hoping to catch us weakened by the ritual. They ran, through corridors filled with panicking servants upstairs that seemed endless, toward the sound of battle that grew louder with each step. Ren's new strength allowed her to keep pace with Lucian's vampire speed, her enhanced senses painting pictures of chem and violence ahead. The south courtyard was a battlefield. Thorn had brought perhaps 50 vampires, mostly young, angry, desperate ones, who believed in the old ways of vampire supremacy. They fought against castle guards, trying to hold defensive positions, and Ren saw with horror that they were targeting the human staff specifically. This wasn't about strategy. This was about making a statement that humans were prey, not partners. Stop! Lucian's voice rang out with such power that both sides froze mid-combat. He strode into the courtyard, Ren at his side, and for the first time she truly understood what it meant to be the Vampire King. Power radiated from him in waves that made even the rebel vampires instinctively cringe in submission. Thorn, Lucian said quietly, explain yourself, now. The scarred commander stepped forward, his face twisted with rage and righteousness. Your weak majesty, marrying a human again, bonding with mortal filth, again. How many times must we watch you debase yourself before we say enough? Careful, Lucian's voice dropped to a purr that was somehow more threatening than shouting. You're speaking about my queen. She's not queen, she's human. You'll die in a blink and you'll be broken again, and our kingdom will suffer while you mourn. How many times, Lucian? How many more mortal brides before you accept that we are superior, that mixing with humans weakens us? You're wrong, Ren said, stepping forward. Her voice carried now new power flowing through the bond, amplified by Lucian's strength. Isolation weakens you. Fear weakens you. Refusing to evolve because you're terrified of change, that's what makes you vulnerable. Silence, human. I am queen. Ren's voice cracked like thunder, and she felt vampire magic responding to her. Not her own magic, but borrowed power flowing through the bond with Lucian. And you will show respect or face consequences. Thorn laughed. You think titles make you worthy? You think bonding gives you authority? You're still just a fragile mortal playing at... He lunged. Vampire speed, supernatural strength, 3 centuries of combat experience aimed directly at Ren's throat. And Ren caught him. Her hand shot out faster than thought, fingers closing around his wrist mid-strike. The shock on Thorn's face would have been comical if the situation weren't so deadly. Bridge queens, Ren said calmly, walk between worlds. We carry human wisdom and vampire strength. We understand mortal suffering and immortal perspective. We are the balance you've been missing. She twisted. Thorn went down on one knee, his arm bent at an angle that had to be painful even for vampire regeneration. You have a choice, Lucian said, moving to stand beside Ren. Surrender now. Face justice for your rebellion. Accept the new order we're building, or continue fighting and force us to make examples. Around the courtyard, the Thorn's followers were watching with growing uncertainty. Their leader brought down by a human queen. Their rebellion crushed before it truly began. Their certainty about vampire supremacy shaken by evidence that partnership could create something stronger than either species alone. One by one, they laid down their weapons. Thorn struggled in Ren's grip, fury and disbelief warring across his face. You can't do this. The old laws are changing, Ren interrupted. Today, now, right here. You can change with them or be left behind. Those are your only options. She released him. Thorn stood slowly, cradling his injured arm, staring at her with an expression that mixed hatred and reluctant respect. This isn't over. Actually, Isadora's voice cut through the tension. It is. The Dowager stood at the courtyard's edge, flanked by the full council, and a force of royal guards that outnumbered Thorn's rebels 10-1. She moved forward with the inexorable force of 6 centuries of authority. Commander Thorn, you are hereby stripped of rank and title. Your followers are granted clemency on condition of swearing new oaths to the crown. And you, she stopped before him, her ancient eyes cold as winter stars. You will live because my son and his queen are merciful in ways I would never be. But you will live knowing you failed, that your rebellion accomplished nothing except proving that their way works better than yours. Take him to the dungeons, Lucian ordered. We'll decide his final fate when tempers have cooled. As guards dragged Thorn away, still spitting defiance and curses, Ren felt her adrenaline crash. She swayed, suddenly exhausted, the trial, the bonding, the battle all catching up at once. Lucian caught her immediately, lifting her into his arms as if she weighed nothing. You need rest. That was too much too quickly. I'm fine, Ren protested, even as her vision swam. You're magnificent and stubborn and currently about to collapse. Lucian corrected gently. Let me take care of you. Just this once, let someone else be strong. Ren wanted to argue, but the truth was she was exhausted in ways she'd never experienced. So she let her head rest against his shoulder and let him carry her through the castle toward their chambers. Rest, Lucian murmured against Ren's hair as he laid her gently on their bed. Tomorrow we rebuild. Tomorrow we begin the real work. But tonight we've earned peace. Ren caught his hand before he could pull away. Stay with me. Always, he promised. They lay together in the darkness, two souls bonded across species and time, alive and whole and ready to face whatever came next, together. 9 months. 9 months since the bonding and the Northern Territories had transformed in ways that would have seemed impossible a year earlier. The integration accord passed the council with surprising support after Thorn's failed rebellion. Suddenly, moderate vampires who had been afraid to speak up found their voices. Human representatives gained actual voting power and governance. Joint patrols of vampire and human guards became standard. The school Ren had championed opened with both vampire and human students learning together history from vampire elders who had lived it, medicine from human doctors who understood mortal bodies. The still room became a full medical training center where vampire healing knowledge merged with human innovation. Mrs. Blackwood led it with quiet authority, training young healers of both species. And everywhere people who had lived, separated for generations, slowly, carefully began building bridges. It wasn't perfect. There were fights, misunderstandings, prejudices that ran too deep to dissolve overnight. But there was also progress, real, measurable, undeniable progress. Tonight, in the private chambers of Ravencrest Keep, Ren held her daughter for the first time. The labor had been long, 16 hours of pain that even her enhanced Bridge Queen constitution struggled to bear. But now, cradling the tiny perfect being in her arms, Ren couldn't remember the pain, could only feel overwhelming love. The child was beautiful. 10 tiny fingers, 10 tiny toes, dark hair like her father, green eyes like her mother. And something else, something that would only become clear as she grew, the potential to choose her own path between two worlds. What should we name her? Lucian asked, his voice thick with wonder as he gazed at his child. His first living child since Elizabeth, 300 years ago. Genevieve, Ren said without hesitation, after the woman who made all this possible. Genevieve Ravencrest. Lucian tested the name, second of her name, first of her kind. The baby opened her eyes, gray like her father's, but warm in ways his had been cold when they first met. She looked at them both with the unfocused gaze of the newborn. She's perfect, Ren whispered. Like her mother. Lucian replied, leaning down to kiss Ren's forehead gently. Through the windows, dawn was breaking over the Northern Territories. First light touching lands where vampire and human worked side by side to build something better. Where children of both species learned together. Where old hatreds slowly, painfully gave way to new understanding. Ren thought back over the 9 months that had passed since the bonding. 6 months ago, they had stood before England's Parliament requesting recognition. She remembered her nervousness, standing visibly pregnant before nobles who had never seen a vampire. Lucian had spoken with calm authority. I come before you not as a myth or a monster, but as a ruler seeking recognition for a nation that has existed in your shadows for millennia. And Ren had stepped forward, one hand on her swelling belly. I stand before you as proof that coexistence is possible. This child will be the first of a new generation. Neither purely human nor purely vampire, but both. A living symbol of what we can become when we stop seeing difference as threat. The vote had passed by a narrow margin. Recognition, official acknowledgement, opening of diplomatic relations. It had been just the beginning. Sir Charles Whitmore had published his chronicles documenting their revolution. The book spread across Europe, inspiring others to question old assumptions about species barriers. Isadora had become their fiercest advocate, using 6 centuries of diplomatic experience to navigate vampire politics with ruthless efficiency. And through it all, Ren and Lucian had built their partnership, learning to share thoughts through their continent, to support each other's weaknesses, to celebrate each other's strengths. Now, holding their daughter, Ren felt the weight of what they'd accomplished, settling over her like a warm blanket. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly, watching Genevieve's tiny face. "Choosing me, choosing this complicated path." Lucian looked at her with eyes that held 348 years of memory, but also genuine joy. "Every single day," he said. Ren's heart stuttered. "I regret every day I wasted before you arrived," he continued, his smile gentle. "Every year I spent dying inside instead of living fully. Every moment I chose safety over risk, isolation over connection. But regret choosing you never. You saved my life, Ren. In every way a person can be saved." "You saved mine too," Ren said. "Gave me purpose, partnership, a life that matters." "We saved each other," Lucian corrected, leaning down to kiss her gently. "That's what partnership means." Little Genevieve made a small sound, not quite a cry, just a noise that said she was present and wanted attention. They laughed together, the sound filling chambers that had been silent too long. Isadora entered quietly, her ancient face softening as she looked at her granddaughter. "She's beautiful. Perfect. Would you like to hold her?" Ren asked. The dowager's expression showed genuine surprise and then pleasure. She took the baby with surprising gentleness, cradling the tiny form with 6 centuries of accumulated wisdom. "Hello, little one," Isadora whispered. "You carry such weight on these small shoulders, the future of 2 species, the hope of a kingdom. But don't worry, you won't carry it alone. Your parents will teach you what I failed to teach your father. That love is not weakness. That partnership is strength. That change, though terrifying, is often necessary." She looked up at Lucian, tears streaming down her ageless face. "I'm proud of you, my son. More proud than I have words to express. You broke patterns I thought were unbreakable. You chose love when fear would have been easier. You built something extraordinary." Lucian moved to stand beside his mother, one hand gentle on her shoulder. "I had help. From my wife, from you eventually. From people who believed change was possible even when I didn't. That's what makes it real," Isadora said. "Not one person's vision, but a community's commitment." A knock at the door interrupted them. Mrs. Blackwood entered, followed by representatives from both the Vampire Council and Human Advisory Board. "Your Majesties," one of the human representatives said, bowing deeply. "We apologize for the intrusion, but there is news. The French vampire territories have sent an envoy. They wish to learn about our integration accord, to see if similar reforms might work in their kingdom." Ren and Lucien exchanged glances, communication flowing wordlessly through their bond. "It's spreading, how," Ren said softly. "What we built here, it's bigger than just us now." Lucien agreed. He turned to the representatives. "Tell the French envoy they are welcome. We will share everything we've learned, our successes and our failures. If our experience can help others build bridges, then perhaps young Genevieve will grow up in a world where cooperation between species is normal, not revolutionary." As the representatives departed to deliver the message, Ren felt a profound sense of peace settling over her. They had not just changed their own lives, they had changed the world. The Vampire King had expected a simple, proper bride who would fit neatly into his dying world. The untamed woman who arrived had given him something far more valuable, a reason to live again, a partner who challenged him to be better, and a future bright with possibility. Together they had built a kingdom where different natures could find common ground, where ancient prejudices gave way to new understanding, where a bridge queen could walk between worlds carrying the best of both. And in their daughter's sleeping face, Ren saw the promise of what could be, a generation that would never know the hatred their parents had worked to overcome. Children who would see cooperation as natural partnership, as strength, diversity, as opportunity. It wasn't perfect, it would never be perfect, but it was real and it was theirs, and it was enough. Lucian wrapped his arms around both Ren and their sleeping daughter, his bond with his wife humming with contentment and love and fierce protective joy. "Thank you," he whispered into Ren's hair. "For what?" "For being untamed, for refusing to be simple, for seeing me when I'd forgotten how to see myself, for making me believe that even after 300 years, it's never too late to change." Ren leaned back against his chest, feeling his heartbeat slow, but steady, the rhythm of immortality now tied to her own mortal span. "Thank you for being brave enough to try," she replied, "for letting me in, for choosing partnership over isolation, for building this extraordinary life with me." Outside their window, the sun rose fully over Ravencrest Keep the first time in 3 centuries. That daylight had felt like hope instead of an ending. The castle no longer existed in perpetual twilight. The kingdom no longer lived divided, and the king who had been dying inside was finally truly completely alive. Their story, born from an impossible meeting forged through trials and tribulations, strengthened by love and partnership, had become the foundation for something that would outlast them both. A legacy of hope, a proof of change, a testament to the truth that sometimes the most extraordinary transformations begin with the simplest choice to be brave enough to try. And they were only beginning.